Is your dog really reactive, anxious, or over the top? Or have we actually just allowed them to repeat the same behaviors over and over again that they're now part of their personality? Because if you really think about it, personality, in a nutshell, is actually just repetition, hardwiring, and cycles just running over and over and over again until they become an automatic process. And the same goes for our dogs as well. But before I get into the nerdy side of everything, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Junior, founder of Paws of Wisdom, where I help over the top dogs and overwhelmed owners break free from cycles of conflict and chaos so they can finally uncover their true potential. And today I want to talk about something that I hear all the time, and it's also something that I used to say all the time with my own dog, which is just that their personality is who they are. So let's break down why that's not true, how repetitive behavior can actually influence personality, and finally, how to break free from those cycles. Just like us, dogs shift through different moods, whether it be stress, frustration, excitement, or even fear. Now, if these moods aren't interrupted after a while, they end up becoming temperaments. We see dogs becoming excitable, we see dogs becoming wary, we see dogs becoming unpredictable. And once they're in this temperament, if we don't break them out of that, this temperament starts becoming a personality. And this is where we start labeling dogs as reactive, as anxious, as nervous, as over the top. And a lot of the times, owners just accept that label instead of seeing the rehearsed pattern behind it. And as I mentioned, I hear it all the time, and it's something that I used to use all the time. Things like, oh, my dog just doesn't like other dogs, or oh, don't mind Rocco, he just gets too excitable. And yes, maybe this is right for some dogs, but on the other hand, there's also the fact that maybe that dog has rehearsed certain behaviors so much and for so long that it's become a part of their personality. Things like lunging, barking, pacing around, all of these on a long enough time scale can lead to these personalities. In neuroplasticity, there's a law called Hebb's law. And this law states neurons that fire together wire together. And what this means for our dogs is the more they repeat a behavior, the more likely it's going to happen, the more automatic it becomes, the more hardwired said behavior becomes. Let's take reactive dogs, for example. Two common reasons that reactive dogs will bark at other dogs is either to create space or because they want to go and say hi because it's frustration, right? Now, once they learn that barking at another dog can create space, once they learn that barking at another dog means you give it in and you let them go and say hi to another dog, they'll start repeating this because there is reinforcement in it to start with. But on a long enough time scale, if we keep allowing that behavior to happen, what we end up seeing happening is dogs that were fine with dogs being 5, 10 yards away just can't handle them unless they're 50 yards away. And if they're any closer than that, they will lose their mind in the same intensity as they would have if that dog is 5, 10 yards away. This is because that dog has rehearsed the same behavior so much that the body has become the mind in this situation. Another example is dogs that struggle to settle. It might start with a little pacing here and a little pacing there, but over time, this can build up to dogs not being able to sleep properly and reacting to every little sound and movement until any movement that we make ends up disturbing their peace. And soon enough, they'll not only react to our movement, but they'll start reacting to the sounds of other movements. This could be car doors slamming, or this could be doors closing, or people walking past the house, until the body, once again, will take over in that scenario. And you'll end up having a dog that barks at everything, or a dog that's labeled as anxious or sound reactive. The issue I see a lot of the time is owners trying to train inside the storm, inside all of the chaos. They're using commands, they're using corrections, they're trying to bribe their dog to stop, but it's just not working. And it's simply because the mind and the body aren't on the same page. And if they're not on the same page, we're not going to change anything. That's why a lot of behavioral change can feel impossible, right? It's not a problem with the plan. The problem is the internal state of the dog, because a majority of time, the owners that I actually end up working with are actually doing a lot of the right things, but it's the fact that they're doing more than they actually need to and adding to a frustrated system. And that's why a lot of these owners get stuck in that management phase, because the dog just is not in the right place internally to accept any of that training, to understand any of those corrections, or to understand any of those commands. Because once again, the mind and the body aren't working together. What we have to do is break these cycles before we get anywhere. We have to put the mind back in control, stop the rehearsal of all of these behaviors. And we can do this through multiple ways, such as using structure and boundaries to stop the rehearsal of these behaviors, but not as punishment. I'm talking about as clarity. We can also strip back on exposure to stress and triggers, things that are causing our dogs to repeat said behaviors. A big issue for reactive dogs is that they are constantly repeating the same behavior on every single walk. And it's just hardwiring that response even more. This is literally why my detox protocol focuses on stopping walks for 2 weeks, stopping your dogs from repeating the same behaviors for 2 weeks and bringing them back out of that environment that's causing them stress, that's allowing them to repeat those behaviors, and putting them in a sterile environment where we can focus on other things. Finally, we can work on meeting our dog's needs to make sure that the unholy trinity, which is stress, frustration, and arousal, making sure that's as low as possible, that isn't interfering with our training at all. Once we end up building regulation back into the mix, we can then start teaching our dog alternative behaviors. We can then start layering in the training. Even though it might feel like it, your dog's personality is not set in stone. Most of these personality traits are just repeated behaviors on a long enough time scale. Because some dogs repeat the same behaviors for days, some repeat it for weeks, some for months, and some for years. And it will take just as long to break those dogs out of these cycles. But I think one major thing for owners to realize and to remember is that your choices determine which patterns end up sticking. Because if you let your dog rehearse chaos, they'll live in chaos. But if you can set the right boundaries, stop your dog from rehearsing the same behaviors and meet their needs, then you can break the cycle. At the end of the day, it's not about changing who your dog is. It's about giving them the tools that allow them to be who they can be. The amount of reactive dogs I've actually seen go from not being a fan of every dog to then being able to run around with other dogs is insane. So before you do think this is just who my dog is, you really need to stop and ask yourself, is that really part of their personality, or have they just repeated a behavior on a long enough time scale? Just remember that patterns can be broken, regulation can be built, and a new personality can be taught. And if you found this useful, hit subscribe for more deep dives just like this. And if you want step-by-step help in breaking these cycles, then check out my free guide in the Paws of Wisdom freebie vault, including the 7-day detox protocol. Links in the description.